Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cammett. Today is Friday. It's the 2nd of May, 2025. Today is day 574 since the attacks by Hamas along the Gaza border on October 7th, 2023. What's happening in Gaza, there was a significant article today in the Washington Post. I'd encourage you to take a look because it has maps showing the redrawn lines by the Israeli establishment, limiting Palestinians to a third of the enclave. Since the breaking of the ceasefire, Israeli forces have declared about 70% of Gaza either a military red zone or under evacuation. So in other words, 70% of the Gaza Strip is a no-go zone. The Israeli military says its evacuation orders allow citizens to flee ahead of fighting, and those that remain will be considered combatants, which mean that they can be fired upon just for walking in the street or for coming out of their homes. In practice, Palestinians say the evacuation orders often force them to flee under fire. Recent evacuation orders have covered broad areas, population centers, and have displaced more than 420,000 people. The vast majority who've already been displaced not once, but numerous times. In addition, Israel has enlarged its, quote, security zone, which is also called a buffer zone, along Gaza's borders with Israel and Egypt. The military says this move is meant to prevent a Hamas attack similar to October 7th and the assault that killed almost 1,200 people. A Gaza-bound ship caught fire and issued an SOS after it reportedly came under a drone attack off the coast of Malta in international waters. This was just after midnight local time, so Friday early morning. The Freedom Flotilla Coalition, which is advocating for an end to Israel's blockade into Gaza, told CNN that the activists were on board the ship carrying humanitarian aid when the alleged attack occurred. Israel has not commented. At least at the time of writing, CNN reported on this. In Israel, a group called Voices Against War posted on their social media account about how, in protest of the genocide in Gaza, this is their post on social media, and the celebration of Independence Day in Israel, activists painted the menorah statue outside of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, red. They surrounded it with puppet corpses, in shrouds. The activists stated at the time when the Israeli government continues to starve and annihilate Palestinians in Gaza and to oppress and dispossess Palestinians in the West Bank, we insist on proclaiming that Jewish supremacy and ethnic cleansing lie at the heart of the Zionist project. The only path to peace and security for all people is to dismantle the apartheid regime, to replace it with a system of justice, equality, and freedom for all. An independence that's celebrated on the blood of tens of thousands of people in Gaza is not independence. We call on all those who support justice, partnership, and freedom to intensify their resistance to the genocide. Again, that was Voices Against War in Israel. The International Court of Justice concludes a week of hearings today on Israel's responsibilities to ensure vital humanitarian aid reaches Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The UN General Assembly requested that the court's advisory opinion last year regarding Israel's legal obligations following the country's move to block the UN Agency on Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, from operating. The court is expected to take months before it delivers its opinion. There was an analysis in Haaretz today called an enduring catastrophe. The Nakba March cancellation deepens the oppression of Arabs in Israel. These are Arabs in Israel refers to Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel. About 20% of the state are Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. So this analyst wrote that the announcement by the Association for the Defense of Rights for the Internally Displaced Persons in Israel, their announcement to cancel the traditional Palestinian March of Return held annually on Israel's Independence Day to mark the Nakba, the catastrophe of Palestinian displacement in 1948, reflects yet another system of narrowing democratic space in the country, particularly for its Arab citizens. The Houthis in Yemen claimed responsibility for a second missile launch towards Israel today. It was the second time sirens were activated within Israel in the last 24 hours after another ballistic missile was launched from Yemen overnight into Friday. The missiles were intercepted by defense systems. In Syria, an Israeli fighter jet bombed an area close to the presidential palace in Damascus as a clear message to the Syrian regime that Israel would not allow the deployment of forces south of Damascus or any threat to the Druze community. Israel is saying they won't allow the deployment of Syrian forces because currently there are Israeli forces there. That was according to Netanyahu. The Syrian government has not commented. Actually, when I prepped this, they had not commented, but I just read a few minutes ago that the Syrian government said that this was a drastic escalation between Syria and Israel. The Syrian government did say they rejected this as a foreign intervention when Israel carried out strikes south of Damascus yesterday during clashes with the Druze militia, security forces, and allied Sunni Islamist fighters. The Israeli army says that its forces are deployed in South Syria to prevent the entry of hostile forces into Druze villages. It's important to acknowledge that the Druze community, many of them consider themselves Syrian and others consider themselves Israeli. And many live in the Golan Heights, which is considered occupied territory from Syria. Many live in the north of Israel. And so some have allegiance to the Israeli state, others to Syria, and others, I believe, want independence. The U.S. government knew the specific location of the journalist Austin Tice, who disappeared in 2012, and the government knew his location for more than a decade, his mother said yesterday, implying that more could have been done to secure the former Marine's release across the 3 successive U.S. administrations. Deborah Tice stated that her belief the U.S. officials knew the location of her son up until the former President al-Assad's ousting late last year is based on extensive intelligence documents she was recently allowed to review by the Trump administration. In Iran, there's a planned 4th round of negotiations between Iran and the U.S. related to Tehran's nuclear program, but that has now been delayed. A new date is being scheduled depending on the U.S. approach, an Iranian official said yesterday. U.S. sanctions on Iran during the nuclear talks are not helping the sides to resolve the nuclear dispute through diplomacy, the official added, referring to Trump's recent threat of sanctions on countries that are purchasing oil from Iran. However, a U.S. State Department spokesperson said this weekend's Rome meeting had never been officially scheduled, and Washington just had not confirmed participation. In the U.S., you might recall, after the October 7th attacks, there were attacks against Muslims in the U.S. and Palestinians. A 6-year-old Muslim boy was killed in a hate crime after the October 7th attacks in Illinois. Today, it was announced that the man who committed the crime was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the hate crime attack on the Palestinian-American boy who was killed and on his mother who was injured. The Trump administration will nominate the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, to be the new UN ambassador. This was just announced. Trump's announcement came hours after multiple news reports that Waltz was leaving his post as a National Security Advisor amid continued controversy over his creation of a signal messaging app chat thread, and that was the thread that was used by the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to reveal the U.S. military plans. The president had previously nominated Representative Elise Stefanik, a Republican from New York, for the ambassador seat, but withdrew the nomination in late March for Representative Stefanik, citing the very slim majority that Republicans have on the House of Representatives. In other words, if she left her seat, there would have to be another election, which could leave the Republicans vulnerable to losing the House. More news is coming out about what happened at the Memorial Day peace events. The Memorial Day is put together by Combatants for Peace. It's an event that acknowledges fallen Israeli soldiers and people who've been lost, that are Jewish Israelis and Palestinian Israelis, and it also acknowledges the death of Palestinians. This article says that rumors spread and the police were warned, but that did not stop a right-wing riot at an Israeli peace event. The police were told 3 times throughout the day about far-right plans to disrupt the Israeli-Palestinian Memorial Day event at a Reform synagogue in central Israel, but they claimed that they were busy in other places. It was the latest extraordinary event in an extraordinary time. Far-right Israeli protesters rioting at a Reform Jewish synagogue that showed a live broadcast of this alternative Memorial Day ceremony. This, of course, happened on the Memorial Day for Israelis, and many people think that it is disrespectful to grieve the loss of Palestinian lives on the same day that you grieve the life of Israelis fallen. At the annual ceremony, Israelis and Palestinians, this is the ceremony of the Memorial Day, the alternative, both Israelis and Palestinians mourned together. A day and a half earlier, calls were made to protest via a live broadcast in an upscale Tel Aviv suburb called Ra'anana, and those started to spread online. Social media posts, announcements in WhatsApp groups, footage of the riot, and details from calls to the police show that the Memorial Day riots were an organized affair. The turmoil at the Beit Samueli synagogue was the product of false claims and incitement. In past years, there's been heckling, there's been spitting, so it's not unusual for these events to be very criticized. But this year, fearing violence, the location was not disclosed. The peace group Standing Together organized several viewings, though, and some were canceled because of threats by extremists. Ra'anana, though, was a hotspot. At the peak, there were 200 demonstrators gathering outside the Beit Samueli synagogue, as only 30 people inside were viewing the broadcast. Some rioters broke inside. They threw objects like stones and firecrackers. Some chased viewers and shouted, "May your village burn," a common far-right threat against Palestinians. And let's go to Gaza. And after all this, with 200 demonstrators, injuries, etc., only 3 suspects were arrested, and then they were released the very next morning. I encourage you to take a look at this story. And in response, just to hear more about what happened, in responses to the posts on social media calling for these far-right protests, they said things like, "We have to blow up the event. We must block access." Another response alluding to the non-Israelites who joined the Exodus in the Bible stated, "We must unite and prevent this. The mixed multitude is among us. Hamas isn't guilty, only the evil left is," referring to the left in Israel. Several posts repeated the outlandish claim that the ceremony was a service for Nakba terrorists. Participants suffered verbal and physical abuse. At least 3 women who watched the ceremony were injured, as were 4 police officers. Outside, the rioters threw objects and they vandalized cars. The rescue took about an hour. Some people left through an alternative exit. More police arrived during the evacuation, some from the Yassam riot police. I would encourage you, look up Standing Together, find them on social media, send them a note, say thank you. Look up Combatants for Peace who organized the memorial ceremony. Say thank you. Say thank you. Say we're praying for you. Say we're standing with you. Say thank you for valuing the lives of all people, and encourage those who are courageously advocating for peace and seeking to tell the stories of pain and suffering and loss for Palestinians and Israelis. That is a beautiful thing, and those people are incredibly courageous. May we offer our support to them. So may God go before us in our continued efforts towards peace. May he go before us as we seek for food, water, gas, and electricity and aid to be allowed into Gaza, the hostages to be returned home, prisoners who are held unjustly in Israeli prisons to be released, as we call for a comprehensive peace agreement that is not perpetuated by violence, but that will end the cycles of violence. May it be so in the name of Christ. Amen.